Terrence here with Root Healthy Plants. In today's video, I want to encourage anyone who sees this video to start a food forest if you haven't already. I just started this food forest in my front yard this year, and I'm going to continue to expand on it next year. I'm doing a video and I'm going to give you 6 of my best tips on how to start a successful food forest. Tip number 1, I want you to use your imagination to think what food and fruits you're going to want in your food forest. I want you to also look up what foods are hardy for your zone, because you don't want to start growing fruit trees or shrubs or vegetables that you're not going to be able to sustain. For example, I'm in zone 7A in New Jersey, and we can't grow citrus trees outside all year round because in this zone it gets too cold for a tree like an avocado tree, a lemon tree, an orange tree, or those type of citrus to sustain through the winter. So with that being said, I want you to just use your imagination, because if you've never started a food forest, it may be difficult to imagine just how to start a foundation. Like, where do you start? That's probably the hardest part, getting started. You have a lawn or lack of a lawn, but you have land and space to work with, but it's like having a blank canvas and you want to sketch a portrait and you want to know, do I start with the nose? Do I start with the eye? How do I start? How do I shape it? I'm going to get to that. I had the same reservations before starting my food forest. It's okay, it's natural. Tip number 2 is protection. I want you to think about how you're going to protect those trees, those shrubs, and whatever else you're going to be planting. How are you going to protect that from wildlife? How are you going to protect that from maybe people walking up and just taking what you worked hard to plant and grow? If you don't already have a 6 to 8 foot high fence around your property or where you're planning to start a food forest, you're going to want to think about how you're going to set that up. My wife and I have a 3/4 of an acre property, but there's no fence around any of it. So what we did, growing on a budget, we went to the internet and also to our local hardware stores to see what type of fencing, what type of posts that they had, and seeing what we can work with and trying to find what type of fencing we could get that was about 6 feet high. I came up with a budget-friendly option. What I'm using to protect my food forests are 6 foot high coated welded wire fencing. I'm also using T-posts every 6 feet to keep that up and secure. I paid about 120 bucks for 50 feet rolls of the coated welded wire fencing, and maybe about 10 bucks for each 8 foot high posts. Posts are going to go in the ground maybe 1 to 2 feet, and this has been working well for me. Although some young groundhogs have gotten through the welded wire fencing because I didn't get the ones that have the smallest holes. In early spring, sometimes I get baby groundhogs that have been able to make it through the fencing. I'm going to make do with what I have now, but in the future, I'm going to look for fencing with smaller holes, maybe chicken wire, at least on the lower half. Whatever fencing that you're going to use, whether it's budget friendly or not, you definitely want to have some type of protection. For me, and the way that I think, I want fencing that has good airflow, but I also want fencing that's not solid so that it gets full sun. I want sun to be able to hit everywhere in my front yard food forest or backyard food forest so that I can maximize my growing space. I don't want to not be able to put something closer to the fence because it's not going to get the amount of sun that it needs. So I take that into account also. Now, I did put fencing up in my front yard. You definitely want to be careful putting fencing up in your front yard and hammering posts into the ground. And please check your local ordinances. You may have a no-dig policy where you are because of gas lines and other pipes and mains. So you definitely want to be careful hammering things in your front yard and maybe even your backyard, maybe the way you have things set up for your home. So definitely take that in consideration. Do not just do what I did and just start hammering posts in your front yard. Now, granted, I did know where my gas lines were because I had them come out before and they marked. You definitely want to check with your local municipality because you don't want to be breaking any rules or laws trying to grow food in your front yard. Tip number 3, soil health. As soon as possible, where you know you want to start growing your food forest, you want to start conditioning your soil. What do I mean by that? You want to start keeping your soil covered and maybe snuffing out if any grass, if you don't want grass there anymore, or whatever the case may be. Say you have grass in a certain area that you want to start growing food in. I might cover that area up, maybe put a tarp over it to kill the grass, and just keep that soil covered. There are many ways to condition your soil, and some of the more natural and healthy ways that I use are just using what I have at my disposal on my property. So if you can see behind me, you might see plenty of leaves. And this, I have trees behind me too. So I have some bigger trees that have been here that are not fruit trees. I have a dogwood right here. I don't know what that big tree is behind me, but all this organic biomass that's naturally coming off the trees, that's coming from the ground, I use all of that. If you have grass there, just cutting the grass, you can simply let the leaves just stay where they lay, or you can start transferring them from other parts of your yard and putting it where you're going to start growing. Ideally, if you have a lawnmower, you might want to chop that up with your lawnmower and then lay it out and just start covering up the soil. That's one way to do it. One of the things that I did, because I'm growing in a back to Eden garden way, I had local tree removal companies come in and bring free arborist mulch, and I got dump truck loads put in my backyard, and I spread that out all over my backyard, and that is my ground cover. The back to Eden garden method is amazing. I've gotten so many benefits from it. It does have its pros and cons, but that's also another way to condition your soil, and it takes time. Whatever style you're going to grow, I would do above ground growing methods. So a no dig method. I've tried the tilling method and it worked. I've tried no dig beds and they work. I'm suggesting to you no dig growing methods because there's less soil disturbance. We definitely don't want to keep disturbing the soil if we don't have to. Granted, or you don't want hard compacted soil as your growing medium, but if you're growing above ground methods, you're going to start building on top of your initial hard compacted soil. So let's say your hard compacted soil is right here in this layer. You might add a bunch of stuff, and now you're growing into a mixture that's about a foot high, for example. Okay, each year and during the year, possibly, you could be continuing to add organic biomass on top of that. So your ground level is going to increase over time. It's going to continue to increase little by little, but it's just going to become so conditioned and soft and airy that you just have an amazing growing medium to work with. Every year, I'm adding organic biomass into my growing medium. Even before you get some type of fencing or protection, start conditioning your soil. The animals are not going to eat your leaves and stuff that's laying on the ground that's dying. So just get your area covered, start protecting it, start adding organic biomass, those type of nutrients that are going to be helpful for your soil. It's going to be food for worms to eat, and worms are going to come in, eat that stuff up, leave their poop, also known as worm castings, and those are nutrients for your plants in the future when you start putting plants and shrubs and trees in. Tip number 4 is your layout. Now this is where a lot of people get overwhelmed and run into hurdles. They don't know how they want to set it up. They don't want to do it wrong. They have so much reservations that they just don't get started. So many people have wanted to start a garden or a food forest, but have run into the issue of analysis paralysis. They get caught up thinking so much about how to start it. You want to make sure you do it the right way. You're doing so much research that you don't spend enough time just jumping in, immersing yourself, and learning along the way. This is a process where you're going to continue to learn each day, each week, each month, each year. So don't overthink it. But you do want to have a general baseline for your layout. Let's imagine that you already have your area mapped out as far as where you're going to put your food forest. You know where you're going to put your fencing, so you know where the perimeter is, so you know what area you have to work within. I want you to start with your trees. Whatever fruit trees you're going to grow, start with knowing what fruit trees you're going to put in. That's important. Why is that important? Well, your fruit trees are something that take the longest to grow. There's a common phrase in the garden community that goes, the best time to plant a fruit tree is 7 years ago. I don't know who coined the phrase, but what they meant by that is it takes so long for fruit trees to produce fruit that it's best to get started immediately planting the fruit trees that you want bearing fruit in your food forest. While on fruit trees, there's a couple things to consider. You can buy fruit trees at different stages. So you can buy a fruit tree that might bear fruit the first or second year of you buying it. It's going to be a bigger tree, but it's going to be more expensive. It depends on your budget, how expensive your fruit forest is going to be, or how many years it's going to take for your fruit trees and shrubs to produce. I did a little bit of variety as far as how old some of the fruit trees that I got are. Some of them are clones off of other trees. I have some persimmon that are about this tall. I got some pawpaw trees that are maybe 2 feet tall. My chestnut trees that I got are maybe about 2 feet tall. I got a couple of nectarine trees behind me there that maybe came about 3 or 4 feet tall. I got a peach tree right there. That one was maybe about first year. That one's maybe about a foot tall. I took a lot of cuttings off of that one. If you want to start a budget food forest, it's best to go online and do your research and look around for small nurseries or tree companies that sell small fruit trees and do a cost comparison between those companies to see what is going to be more cost effective for you and what fruit trees are hardy for your zone. Another thing to consider for fruit trees is your spacing. Your fruit trees are going to have the stronger roots of what you're going to have in your food forest. So you have to be really clear and have a hard line on where you're going to be putting your fruit trees because they need the right amount of spacing. You can get away a little bit more with improper spacing on plants because they're less expensive. Your roots aren't as hard and defined. Your trees are going to be your foundation. Those are going to produce every year and continue to produce for many years. So you want to take special care with planting them and letting them have the proper root space. That's how you're going to start mapping out your food forest first. Let's say, for example, if you want to use the general rule of thumb of 8 feet spacing for fruit trees, you could say, okay, all right, I want a fruit tree here. I know I'm going to need 8 feet spacing around that fruit tree. Let's say you want to make a blueprint of your food forest and you're going to do a mock layout on paper. Let's say you have a 24 by 24 foot space. So you might go, I can put 3 fruit trees this way, 3 fruit trees this way, 3 fruit trees this way, and you'll end up with 9 fruit trees. Then we move to your next layer in your food forest, and that's going to be your shrubs, your bushes. In my front yard food forest here, I have numerous blueberry bushes and I have some elderberry bushes. I have some rose bushes for pollination and just looking pretty in my front yard. And I have a few other native bushes that I'm still deciding whether I'm going to keep them or not. But I'm going to keep expanding in here as far as shrubs because I hit my limit as far as trees in this area. I have fig trees, peach trees, and American plum, nectarine trees. I got pawpaw trees. I have hazelnut tree. I have a chestnut tree. Now I need to start inserting shrubs. So you can work off that basic blueprint of trees and start adding in your shrubs. So you start looking up how much spacing do I need or want between my shrubs. Once you have the shrubs figured out, you're 2/3 of the way there. The next thing you have to worry about is what you're going to plant as far as your annuals and biannuals, depending on what zone or region you're in. Each year I put out new peppers, or I'm going to overwinter some peppers and bring my peppers from the previous year back outside when the spring comes back. That I can worry about at another time. You can start mapping it out early just to get a feel for where you're going to put certain things. Just get those fruit trees and shrubs figured out first, get those in the ground first, and give those time to start growing and producing. The next layer, you have time to worry about where you're going to put your peppers and onions and eggplants and tomatoes and whatever else you're going to grow. You have time to figure that out and where you're going to put those. The third layer, which are your plants that are going into your food forest, you want to just think about where you're going to put those in relation to your trees because you want them to get the proper amount of shade. Things that you're going to put closer to your trees are things that need partial shade. Now that you have your basic blueprint and layout for your food forest, we're going to move on to the next step. Tip number 5, compost. It's similar to the tip of soil health, but I want you to start composting. Find an area that you're going to start collecting compost in. I have 4 compost bins from organic food scraps to leaves, trees, weeds, wood chips, whatever organic biomass that you find outside that is not sprayed with anything, because some people spray their yard. I don't like to use stuff that has been sprayed or has been chemically affected. My yard is completely organic, so I use everything. All organic biomass, I use it. Trees, limbs, bushes, sticks, leaves, grass, weeds, even weeds with seeds. Even tree limbs I use in my garden. Although I process them in a way where I let them dry out. I use them for fuel in the fire, for cooking, or other purposes. And then the biochar might go in my compost, and then over time, the compost goes in my garden. So I use everything. I want you to find compost bins or a compost area, or make a compost bin and start getting into the habit of composting so that you have ready nutrients to add to your garden. Some people like to spray fertilizers in their yard. They go and buy store-bought fertilizers, and I'm not knocking those gardeners that do that. Save yourself some money, keep your costs low. I run a super low maintenance, low cost way of growing because I use so much that nature provides. You know, I spend little on the fencing, which was just an initial cost, and I'm not continuing to spend. I use this fencing every year. So maybe some on some seeds, some initial cost for trees, but I keep my costs relatively low. This is super low maintenance, super low cost, and this is going to continue to provide food year after year. Growing the way that I grow is going to continue to provide food for myself and my family for years to come with little time input and very low maintenance. I'm so grateful that I grow the way that I grow. I look forward to helping and sharing any tips that I have. Tip number 6, irrigation. I suggest finding an irrigation setup to where you don't have to top water with a hose, or if your area that you're growing in is a little far from your house, you may not have enough hose to reach that area, and top watering is just not the best way to have to water your plants. You don't need to water the leaves. It's about watering the ground so that the roots can absorb it. Mostly what I do is I use drip irrigation. I have a bunch of drip irrigation set up in my backyard food forest. I still have yet to install drip irrigation in my front yard food forest, but my backyard food forest is well taken care of with drip irrigation, and I have that set up on different hoses and timers. I'll do a separate post on my drip irrigation setup. The drip irrigation is something that's going to keep your plants alive and keep the maintenance very low. That was a game changer for me. On my spigot for my backyard drip irrigation, I have a 4-prong hose separator, and then I have a timer that's attached to it. It's on a digital timer. So at certain times of the day, the drip irrigation turns on its own, whether I'm home or not home. So my plants get taken care of and they stay hydrated regardless. I suggest you look into some type of drip irrigation. I used to stress about, oh man, it's a super hot day. It's 90 degrees, 100 degrees. My plants are going to dry out. Things are going to die. And once I found out about the drip irrigation, I never had to worry about that again. If you found this video informative or entertaining, please hit that like button. Please share my videos. I'm trying to get the word out there. I just hit 1,000 subscribers, and I appreciate you all so much. I want to grow this channel and get the word out there and increase the reach of our garden community. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe. And if you have any questions or comments, put it in the comment section, and I'll see you on the next one. Keep it growing.